Hey, this is Paul Banis of GreatDad.com. I've got the website GreatDad.com, which is was created because dads don't always think like moms. And if you're just tuning in, Great Dad Talks is a series of weekly conversations with new and expert fathers, all with a point of view on modern parenting. And as a coach, I'm always just really interested in how modern dads are evolving, since my kids are already 17 and 21. So I'm excited to talk to dads with younger kids and see what's going on out there today. So today I'm talking to Wade Galt, who also has a podcast and has a philosophy about trying to create a 4-day work week so you can spend more time with your kids. So welcome, Wade.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we really want to talk about today is, we as coaches, we're always trying to get quality of life. And when I talk to dads, I'm always trying to get dads to be more present with their kids, spend more time with their families. But I'm also really just constantly aware that what might be great time, or the time you'd ideally want to spend, comes against the realities of having to pay the mortgage, having to put food on the table, all the rest of it. Even if you don't create for yourself a super luxurious lifestyle where, you have to make tons more money to buy that new car and pay the mortgage, big things. A lot of people just deal with day to day, just getting by is hard in modern America, depending on where you live. So any tips and tricks that we can talk about that allow dads to spend more time with their family is, I think, valuable. So you've got a real philosophy around this, and I want to hear a little bit more about your backstory and how you came to learn these things.
Sure. So first of all, I simply believe life's short. I think a lot of
That is true.
people know that. They've experienced that in some way. I'm 49. I've watched enough people my age, when I was younger, at different ages, pass away earlier than I thought. So that in and of itself is sort of the premise of life, and not in some sort of carpe diem, I've got to go out and party and get plastered and wasted, but in a sense of, really treasuring the people that are important to you. I'm blessed to have a father who's an entrepreneur, a mother who's very much a thinker about spirituality, philosophy, psychology. And I got to watch a lot of my father's friends make more money than they thought they would in a shorter period of time than they thought they would, probably about 30 years ago. And I got to see what a lot of people have said is that money is a multiplier. It doesn't make people happier or sadder. It really sort of just amplifies wherever the person's at for the most part.
Yeah.
And so while I definitely want to earn a lot of money and I want to do it in a good way and help people, money's not the variable. And as I've sort of kept my eye on this topic, and I now start to listen to famous athletes, famous musicians, people that make millions and perhaps billions of dollars, and you ask most of them what's most important, and it comes back to family and relationships and the people that are important to them, and then also getting to do what they believe they're put on this planet to, whether that be vocational work or simply stuff they enjoy doing, playing the guitar, in my case, playing beach volleyball on Fridays, whatever it might be. And so that being the premise, instead of my next year's goal being, can I get a raise? Usually my next year's goal is, can I carve out some more free time? Can I do some stuff on my bucket list? Can I find a way to spend some more time with my family, my wife, our kids, more time just enjoying life? And so while other people constantly seem to be looking for financial raises, for me, I'm usually looking for a quality of life raise.
Yeah, I just don't know how you can explain that to people, to young people, especially young entrepreneurs, young go-getters. I mean, I was like that myself in my 20s, 30s, 40s. I wanted more money. I wanted more things. I wanted more, better wine, not just okay wine. I wanted better wine. But it's just such a constant in when you talk to people, when you talk to experts who have studied happiness. Everybody knows that once you get the roof over your head and the 3 square meals and you have your health, you don't, with every extra $1,000, you don't incrementally go up, and it's not even a matter of marginal rate of return. It just doesn't happen. You need to have that thing. And most people don't get the fact that at the end of your life, you are, the only thing that matters is the friends and family who really care enough to even bother to visit you in the hospital. And if you built your life around money, obviously, you don't have any money anymore. People don't care. But how does that dichotomy work, or why do you think people miss that? Is it Is it the way we're taught on all the social media or all the media that we have to make money? You think that's the biggest root of that thought, that
Well, I think
money
there's
buys
a couple
happiness?
things. I think people get tricked into or fool themselves into believing that life is one dimensional.
Mhm.
Most of us know, if you gave somebody just truckloads of money and they had no other dimensions of their life, their emotional life, their spiritual life, their family life, their friend life, their work life, their career life, those are part of it. But if you only had money, that in and of itself wouldn't make you happy, nor does it fix everything. As we know, with people like Steve Jobs having access to plenty of money, but still passed away because of health issues. And he didn't do anything wrong per se, but that in other words, money couldn't fix everything. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were comparative by nature.
Yeah.
We see other people just out of, oh, is that nicer? Or do I want that? Or do I not want that? I see something else, whether it be a toy or a car or a house. And we tend to miss the full equation. When I'm working for something, it takes me time to do the work. And whether I'm an entrepreneur, an employee, however you want to do it, unless you literally have money that's been outright given to you, at some point you've got to do work to earn things. And so, for example, if I buy something that doesn't really matter to me, and let's say it cost me $1,000, and to keep life really simple, let's say I make $100 an hour after taxes, well, it cost me 10 hours of my time. So now we've added a different variable to the equation, not just my money, but my time. And if you add to that the simple idea that, and maybe kids don't see this because they're younger, but I'm 49. There's things I cannot do now, or at least not as well as I used to when I was 29.
Right.
And that's just wisdom in life, and it perhaps happens slowly. But when we start looking at, to your point, what it is we're going to remember our life for, and even just looking back your life, think about your 10 most positive life experiences. If you think about that, and even if you pause this, if you're listening, and then after the pause, you come back and think, okay, well, how many of those happened at work? And for some people, it might be, 4 or 5. For most people, I find it's 1 or 2. Most of those happened outside. They were relationships. And even if they were at work, they were about relationships or vocational life purpose. There was still something deeper than, well, I got a big paycheck. And so if we're focused on that, that can lead us. It certainly does not guarantee it'll pay all the bills. We don't necessarily assume that if we do what we love, that everything's going to work out fine, any more than if I love somebody, it's going to mean a marriage is going to work out perfectly fine. There's work, and sometimes things don't turn out the way we would hope they would or think they would. But overall, I think we just oversimplify the equation. And then, yes, on the flip side, bottom line, news, selling, marketing products, I can't sell you something if you don't feel you need it. And so there's kind of 2 basic ways of selling. One is for me to do the work and uncover what really are your needs. And the other is to try to manufacture a need and try to help you see that if you don't look like Johnny or Susie, if you don't have what they have, you don't have the toy or whatever, that you are somehow inferior. Or if you don't have the purple pill or whatever it is, or the red pill or the blue pill, that you're not okay and everybody else has it, so you need one. And that's the part of our economy that's borders on a little sinister. It's manipulative. And that's also the part of our economy, specifically talking about the United States, that is, it's like a depreciating asset. It literally is a part of our economy that hurts us. When you talk about fundamentals, building a business, as opposed to, let's say, trading stocks up and down, building something that's fundamentally good. Think of Warren Buffett's investing style.
Right.
In the long run, things work out, as opposed to some of these zero-sum games, such as I'm going to flip real estate without adding any value to it. There's nothing wrong with flipping real estate, but if I literally just say, I want to get there first, it's like the person that scalps tickets and says, well, I got there before you did. And there's people that do that. And if you do that, I would just ask you, is that sustainable? Are you adding something? Because if you don't, usually you find that people that are in situations like that, where they're not in some way adding something, they don't feel like they're adding. And again, I know plenty of realtors that add a lot by what they do of their service. So it's not just about saying if you sell a gadget that you're not doing something, but if we're not putting something of ourselves into our work any more than into our children, I mean, you can have a child be in your house or dwell in your house for 18 years. That doesn't necessarily make you a father. And what you don't put in, there's still just what do you want to call them, natural laws or natural outcomes that you're going to miss out on things that, as opposed to if you had put in that time.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at fathers or families and they they're trying to figure this out. How can they go about thinking about those kind of trade-offs? Like if somebody said today, okay, I buy your idea of happiness and I don't need any more. I'm fine where I am. I'm going to convince my wife that she doesn't need whatever it is that she wants today. And I'm going to convince the kids they don't need, another PlayStation 5 or whatever. And we're going to start from scratch today. What would you suggest they start thinking of first of all? You talked about trying to think about, like, can I trade off a raise for more quality of time? But how would you go about that?
Sure. So a couple of things is you don't have to trade it off forever. At some point, you'll want more toys. When I was single and I had plenty of time, I wanted more money because I didn't have bills and I was already getting to do what I wanted with my time. But a couple of things. First of all, a lot of people want to be able to work less, but they've not set up their expenses in a certain way. So you made a reference to something earlier about, whether or not people do spend too much. Some people hate their job. And so what they do is they say, well, since I hate my job so much, I'm good at it though, I get paid. Well, on the weekend, I'm going to blow a lot of money having fun. Yeah. But if I never get a chance to sort of weigh out, well, then I'm on a cycle, and I just have to keep staying in that hamster wheel because I financially can't afford to. Part of it is just, first of all, making the most of the time you already have available. So presumably you have some sort of time on the weekend, even if you work 6 days a week or whatever. So I'd say, what are you doing with that time? So some people would say, well, Wade, I'm primarily watching TV, and TV is great. I love watching sports. I love watching Netflix here and there. But if I have my entire life as a consumer of information, you and I both know the people in the world that make things happen, that make impacts, that make money are usually creating content, or at least for part of their time. The people who are only consuming content usually are not getting wealthier. They're even from a financial standpoint, nor are they necessarily developing because they're not putting their stamp or their unique voice out into the world. But in a very practical matter, it comes down to looking at things such as a family to say, first of all, which as a parent can be very difficult to say, okay, we have a limited amount of money. Yeah. And I happen to live in Naples, Florida. There's a lot of people here doing really well, a lot of people doing normally. There's a lot to compare to. So with our children who are right now 12 and 15, and there's great people here, but there's a lot of people that have way more stuff than we do. And it's not like they're in their face saying, hey, I got this, you don't. They simply have it. And your kid's like,
and the kids are
wow,
like,
that's pretty cool. How come we don't have one of those? And to be really clear, there are some people, God bless them, who have figured out how to have free time, how to make a lot of money, how to serve a lot of people, and how to be present for the kids. That's what we're all aiming for. So this is not a thing about saying it's an either or. I don't want to set that up because that's a faulty belief. But at the same time, there are moments where you say, okay, I'm in this current situation. I'm making a certain amount. I can't just flip a switch. Anybody who's an entrepreneur knows you can't necessarily just flip a switch and all of a sudden have money jump from you being, let's say, an employee to an entrepreneur, or even an entrepreneur to start a new project. It takes time. And so in the meanwhile, do you make the most of the time you have? Do you look at the possessions that you're investing money in, and do they serve you? And bottom line, are you getting to know who your children are, who your spouse is, the people in your life, your family, your friends, your neighbors? Because not so much just when you die from an ego standpoint of how do you want to be remembered, but genuinely, what sort of memories do you want people to have of you? And so it starts like anything else with just a little bit at a time, carving out some time. If it's even something as simple as putting the phone down and being present with your kids and fully hearing what they're saying, realizing that at least ours are 15 and 12, at least till about 12 to 15, they really actually want to hear what you have to say. Now it starts diminishing, as you know, because there's
I know too well, yes.
Yeah, they want to hear the outside world, but if you've built that foundation, then later on they want to come back and say, hey, here's what I've learned. Here's what I've found, from a standpoint of pride, rather than, well, who are you, old man? I want to talk to you, and all the other, F off or whatever is go away, as opposed to, hey, wow, this is this collaborative thing. And, I asked my mom a while back, when does parenting end? She said, wait, I'm still waiting. So, I think it's an ongoing process, but it's one of those things. There's a reason why the Cat Stevens song, Cats in the Cradle, is a popular song. There's truth to it.
Yeah, we brought up two things there. I think one is legacy and one is relationships. I think the legacy part is it's harder to understand until you get a little bit older. That as you're older. I mean, I'm 63, so I've got a little bit more history than you do. But you realize that there's this long path and there's this continuum that is ongoing of your parents and grandparents, and then there'll be people down the road, and you're part of a long stretch of time, and that's harder to understand when you're 25 than it is to understand at my age. And the other thing is about relationships, because you just can't explain to some people about how relationships are not a one-off thing. It's not like I took you to Disneyland, where's the love? It is an ongoing process. And as you wisely noted, the time that you can spend really with your kids where you're kind of running the show ends at about 12, and it's the time when they're sentient beings is really only from 2 to 12. So you have 10 good years, and that's the time to focus, right?
Yeah. Well, in addition to that, you just look at the basic concept that what do you want to do with your life? What do you want the experience to be? So sometimes people who are single and have no children will say to me, well, Wade, I love my work. I want to work 6 days a week, 7 days a week. I said, that's fine. I just happen to believe there's more going on in the world than me being on my laptop. And I really like my work. I enjoy the work I do. Some of the work I love, some of the work I like, but it pays the bills and it allows me the freedom. So there's trade-offs. I'm not doing every single thing that I want at every moment. And even if you look at a professional athlete, a musician, a rock star, they're not on stage at Madison Square Garden or Wembley Stadium every minute of the day. They get those peak experiences. And then other than that, they're practicing. They're still in any job, in any work, the work, the grind, the putting in the work. But the question is, did you get chance in between to make those connections and truly experience the world through another person's eyes? Again, it's not a coincidence that so many of these wealthy people say, what's your most important thing? Oh, just sitting around hanging out with my family. You see sometimes athletes, they're in the prime of their careers or still where they could get a few more years. Like you're in the NBA, you're in the NFL. No, I want to spend more time with my family. My kids are a certain age. And you know what? They're only going to be there for that long. And so I think that perspective is just true. And also, just from a money standpoint, just a very practical thing I learned, I saw quite a few of my father's friends that really good people, really good men that worked hard to provide a certain level of lifestyle for their kids. And they arrived at a certain age in their mind where they said, hey, kids got it together. And the kids were 14, 15, 16, like, hey, Dad, see you later. Can I have them, please? Give me car keys. And so it was kind of sad to see, wow, they weren't bad people, but they missed an insight. Yeah. And missing that insight cost them. And I just don't know any other guaranteed return on investment than spending time with the people you love, giving and contributing in a way you care about, or doing things that are just true or aligned with your purpose, your soul, or what you enjoy doing. And again, that could be playing the guitar. It could be skimming rocks on the water. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal. And again, usually those things are not extremely expensive. I go to the volleyball, I play beach volleyball. I go to the beach, to play volleyball. And it costs me maybe $100 a year in maintenance. Now, other sports are more expensive. In my case, maybe I'm fortunate that I chose that. But we've had one of our cars for 15 years. We had another car for 5 years. There's just, to me, the time freedom is more important. And again, it doesn't happen immediately, but as you start making choices in those directions, and especially you realize what you're missing out on, how much can an extra doodad really provide in your life? How much fulfillment can it? And put simply, if you're going to look at a physical thing to meet an emotional need for connection, you're not going to get it. Whether that physical thing is alcohol, whether it's a toy, whether it's a gadget, emotional connections meet emotional needs. Physical things meet physical needs. So it's kind of a mismatch. And in fact, one of the definitions I've heard of addiction is when you're trying to meet a need from the wrong dimension. You have a physical need. Well, give me water. That'll meet my need for thirst. But if I have an emotional need to connect and you give me alcohol or a drink, it's just not going to meet the need. It just doesn't work that way. There's no judgment. It's just not how it works.
So I think there's already brought up a bunch of good things. First of all, you can start this weekend. I mean, you're going to have free time this weekend or this evening or whatever, and you can start you can start right now trying to be a more present person, and that can take a whole bunch of different things. We also talked about thinking about whether you're a consumer or a creator. I think some of the things that you were just saying in terms of creating aren't necessarily even like content creation. You don't have to start a podcast or a YouTube commercial or YouTube channel, but even just like you said, skipping rocks rather than sitting at home passive, consuming information or consuming entertainment is a lot different of an orientation, just right from the get-go. And I love the fact that you don't put a value orientation on what that activity is. You don't have to be a pro guitarist, but if guitar feeds your soul, that's different than listening to music and consuming it that way. And then thirdly, the financial piece, I think that's a harder one for people to consider, but what they can give up in their life for those types of trade-offs. And that takes place, every day in our daily lives.
Well, yeah. And a lot of those things we're giving up already, but it goes back to that concept that's said in so many just basic personal finance books of at some point we made, I don't know, $30,000 a year. And then we made 40. And did we put aside the 10? No, we figured out how to spend 40 or 45. Right. So I think part of it's that. And then yes, as far as quality of activity, I think two things: quality of attention with people, because your kids know when you're listening, other people know when you're listening the same way you do. But then also as far as judging the activity, I sing badly to Def Leppard songs or other songs while I played music really loudly in my ears and play the drums badly and inaccurately. I friggin' love it. So and I'm actually looking forward to practicing and getting better. But I have aspirations to be like drummers that are ridiculously good. So whether Stuart Copeland or Neil Peart or Travis Barker. So I need to find like an in-between and actually catch up with some of this and meet up with those guys. But I still enjoy that. And even something as simple as talking about basketball with my son, or being present with my daughter when she's playing music, or paddleboarding with my wife, whatever it might be, it doesn't have to be fancy. And I think especially as a male, at least the way I was raised, there's this sense that we have to take on so much. So my wife always says that when we found out we were pregnant, she's like, Wade, you went right into your office. I was already an entrepreneur, but you went right in your office and I didn't see you for 3 months, basically. Like, in other words, I came out, but in other words, so focused, like, I've got to do this. Everything's on me.
Yeah.
And in my case, I chose not to play beach volleyball for about 6 years. I thought I was being a better dad. And that was a horrible decision. Yeah. It was again, tactically horrible. So Wade, you're going to put all the pressure for your fulfillment on this relationship with your wife and a newborn. And because we were observing a sleep schedule, we weren't seeing people as much because the baby went to sleep at a certain time when we were doing that. So that was just a bad idea.
You were focused more on making the money rather than on nurturing the relationships that were the more important.
Yeah. And with all the love in this is the tough part. This is the part that you probably see it too. It's so disheartening because like I'm like, dude, I'll do anything. I'll be that guy. But it was the wrong advice. It was the wrong approach. And so it's still at times then when there's pressure on that, I don't get to do this because of the kid. And so now I start blaming the child for what I didn't get to do, or because my needs didn't go met, because I, again, became one-dimensional or two-dimensional in my approach to life, as opposed to seeing there's so many different parts. They were still my family, my friends. They didn't go away. There was no need to completely exclude them. Certainly it's a different life when you're a parent, if you're committed, and your time priorities will shift depending on how seriously you take the role. But it was such an extreme solution. And again, there was all this pressure, no different as an entrepreneur, all this pressure on me to do everything, as opposed to this communal approach of saying, okay, other people can help. And it's not up to me to make everything happen by itself. And even there's that quote, or that from the book, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which I happen to think there's some truth to, of your children are, how do you words it? They're yours, but they're not yours. In other words, they're of you, but they're not from you. So yes, it's your job to raise them, this and that, but it's not for you to decide what they're going to do. And again, that's an editorial. People might have a different view of the world, but in other words, that they come through you, but they're not yours. They're not your possessions. They're not mini-me's. They're not for you to decide. And so when you start seeing it differently, say, okay, I'm going to provide this environment where this child can flourish. And yes, I'm still going to hold them accountable to certain things, and they're the parent, and they're going to pick up the dishes and whatnot. But just a different approach that's more a little more humble, a little more curious, but again, less pressure on us. And I think, again, as the males, we're sometimes given this hero role that we just have to do everything. And so then the idea of making less money sounds like, oh, Wade, so you're saying be a wuss. Oh, Wade, you're saying don't cry.
No,
Wade, you're saying don't be a man, Wade. You're saying
right.
be soft. I'm saying no, your kid's not going to give a damn whether or not you bought if you take him to a Miami Heat game, yes, they'd love to have floor seats. But at the end of the day, if you're going to spend 15 years for one game to have floor seats, or you could go every year, twice a year, your kid's going to enjoy going twice a year to even the horrible seats, still having that experience with you. And so as dads, and I'm sure in some form mothers experience as well, but let's be gentler on ourselves, but more than that, let's be wiser. Let's give our kids more credit, as if they're automatically that shallow that they can't enjoy a game unless it's the floor seats, that they can't enjoy an activity unless it's the best activity, the best movie, the best toy, the best everything, when there is that trade-off that says, especially if you're an employer, if you have an income that's more fixed, well, then, okay, then I'm just gonna have to keep working more hours and never have time with this person.
Yeah, you touch on something that's really important there, I think, in terms of whether the kids can parse out that. I think we often hear people lauding their fathers or their mothers for their incredible success. You know, they were the Secretary of State or whatever it was. But in that story, what you rarely hear is, you know, I respect my mother, father for all the incredible things they did. They are amazing on the world stage and everything. But what's lost a little bit is how many, you know, nights without mom or dad present there were in that relationship. And God bless them if they all come out fine and everybody is mentally healthy. That's wonderful, and those people are superhumans. But most of us just can't do that. We can't be on the world stage and be present. And there's something in what you were talking about, the like that provider role, just using words like provider or sole breadwinner or whatever, puts so much pressure on you as a father or the mother to be completely absent, but bring home the bacon. You know, that's the most important thing. And that might have been true, you know, 50 to 7,500 years ago, but less true now when we do have some real choices.
Well, I think too, if we look at humans, again, if we have multidimensional needs, if at least we are body, heart, mind, spirit, and again, spirit in the generic sense, not in any particular religion, but that there's this part of us that wants our why, our purpose, our mission, whatever it might be, that to assume that our child is so one-dimensional that they only want a thing or a toy or a doodad as opposed to our time, I think is just short-sighted. And then also there's the flip side of that, which is then sometimes we have unmet needs. We want to prove that we're doing really well at something. And so, well, you know what? Okay, yeah, I'll get to the kid. And we're still going after the things that we never achieved. But meanwhile, the kid's missing out. And again, it's not bad. It's, you know, even neglect is a word for that. But it's just less than it could be. And not in a sense of, oh, you're a bad parent. It's like, no, you're missing out as the parent. So there's this rich experience of parenthood that happens. And I know, because I've missed that out on it times. I know certainly there's times in my year when I'm busier and I'll tell the kids, okay, here's when I'm busy and I can't. But that's why, at least for me, who can very much go type A very easily and work 68 hours a week, that's why for me, the 3-day weekend concept is something that keeps me in check. So in the 4 days, sometimes it's 4 days by 8 hours. Some days it's 4 days by 12 hours. But on the weekend, it's for the most part, over 85% of the time, it's, okay, I'm fully present, or at the very least, I'm around, I'm hanging out, I'm near them. And again, but also I get that, and this is so huge for parents, when your kids are in school, if you're in a part of the country, which I think most parts of the country, kids go to school Monday through Friday. I know there's a couple places where they don't. But on Friday, guess what? If your kid's of school age, you got a babysitter. Go out and do some stuff. Golf, fish, hang out, relax, whatever it is that you do, and give yourself that. Because if you don't, at least in my experience, then you come a weekend and it's like, oh, everything I'm them, the taxi driver, all the, the cliches we hear. But I never got my needs met. And let's be clear, is it my fault or is it my 10-year-old or my 5-year-old's fault that I didn't meet my needs? I mean, is it really up to them to help me meet no. And so it's not even a matter about selfish. It's the whole oxygen mask thing. If I'm not happy and fulfilled, and that's where I think a lot of people come with the idea that to some people it sounds selfish, of one of your first responsibilities just to the world is to be a happy human being. Because whether it's Hitler or any other person that has issues, that does really, really not so good stuff, or just the people that neglect, if they were happy, a lot of that stuff probably wouldn't happen. So I think in general, and maybe that's an extreme example, but overall, just as a parent, when we're happier, our children see that, and they see that as a norm. So that when they're off that, they're like, oh, wait, something's off, versus, oh yeah, mom, dad, they're always ticked off. They're always edgy. There's always this. And, oh, and by the way, they're not present with me. So now the internet's raising me, and the ideas are out there, and the marketers are raising me. And no, the marketers are not looking to raise children. They're looking to sell stuff for the most part. So, that's what the kids are being raised by sometimes, as opposed to what you would hope for them.
And so in your 3-day weekend philosophy, is part of that outsourcing some of our daily tasks, if you can afford it, or to find that extra time? Or how concretely can people grab that extra time if they're an entrepreneur? Let's say they sell real estate, or they have a 9-to-5 job, or even a 60-hour week job.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think let's keep things simple in the sense of, the word outsourcing sometimes sounds very fancy. If you go to McDonald's or Burger King, you're outsourcing cooking. If you go to the place to get a haircut, you're outsourcing your hair being cut. So we already do this in certain ways. We look to things that we say, look, somebody else would be better doing this than I would. Now, you can get more strategic with that. Yes, as an entrepreneur, there is the idea of, well, if there's certain tasks I do that are, I'll just use a rounded number for math's sake, that are $10 an hour tasks. And if I make $50 an hour, well, then at least if I can get one more hour a week of $50 per hour work, well, then I can now trade that for 5 hours and hire somebody else. I still got to go get that hour. And sometimes people forget that. As entrepreneurs, I've had that stage. It was like, outsource me some stuff, man. Let's go. But I forgot to
watch more Netflix
on the other side to hustle to make sure I got the money.
Yeah.
But so it can be that. And there's plenty of places, whether it's websites like Fiverr or Upwork, where you can hire freelancers to do work for you. Or if it's, certain podcasting services that, for example, in our case, that specifically produce podcasts. But a lot of it is first looking at, what can you eliminate? What don't you need to be doing as an entrepreneur? What are the clients you don't need to be spending time with? What are the projects that aren't turning out for you that maybe you need to relabel those as hobbies? So, for example, I have some books I've written on spirituality. I don't intend to have them be huge sources of income for me, or even sources of income for me. Those go in my hobby group.
Right.
And I'll work on those on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's just my choice. That's how I want to do that. But also, there's no pressure. There's no timeline. There's no, I'll get to those when I get to those. And I don't just vegetate Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm doing other creative things. So I'm focused on creating a great business life and value for my clients and the people I work with on Monday through Thursday. And on the weekend, I'm looking to create an awesome life for my family and for me. So first of all, there's just that. But then there is the part as an entrepreneur too of, but I like this so much. I want to do what I love and the money will follow. I'm 21 years an entrepreneur. 80% of my income comes from a software business that I created because a client asked for it and it grew. It is not my passion. It is not. And yet it might be part of my reason for being here on this planet. One of my friends has even talked about that. If we think, well, because it makes me feel so good, it must be what I'm called to do. And yet for me, part of what I'm called to do is to be a parent. I don't get paid for that. And yet I do that. In fact, I do that regardless of whether I get paid. Part of it is coaching kids in sports and youth sports. So this idea that we're necessarily going to get paid for what we believe is our life purpose, number one, I think is not necessarily the case. Sometimes you can, sometimes you might not. But also there's many forms of our life purpose. Again, a parent, a coach, all these different roles, a friend, a child to, a son or a daughter to our parents. I think there's so many different things that are part of our purpose. So to get locked into this sometimes idealistic view that we're going to do what we love and it's going to be a purpose and we're going to love it and people are just going to pay us awesomely, that's not been my experience. And even the people that do that are the ones that have said, oh yeah, I only want, like one of my wife's cousins plays guitar and that's such an oversimplification. He's a brilliant and talented musician. And maybe 20 years ago, he wanted to sort of earn his stripes. So he was playing in the subways of Barcelona and as his guitar and learning. And now he's this famous musician all of a sudden out of nowhere, but he's gone the whole path and he has had sacrifices he's made lifestyle wise and whatnot to pursue that. And so he truly has his 20, 30,000 hours. He is brilliant at what he does, but there's other things he's given up. So this idea to say, I'm just going to pop in one day, do a $2,000 course or a $50 course or listen to a podcast, and all of a sudden be in the same pairing as that person, it's more than just delusional. It's not fair. It's egotistical. There's so many different things where you say, well, that's just not how it works. And if you want fairness, well, why should I be able to do what Lionel Messi can do with a soccer ball or LeBron James with a basketball just because I feel like it? That's not how it works. So in anything, I think the baby steps approach. But again, to your point, just be present. The being present with the people, an hour, 5 minutes, and it's not trying to put people down. We're so habitual as creatures. So sometimes even something as simple as when your kid comes in the door, how did it go? And instead of having that urge to teach them or guide them or show them, to just, how did it go? What's going on? Tell me more. Tell me more. And you'll realize too, which I'm only now starting to get even remotely good at this, how you can listen your way to guiding them to where you want to go. As another thing, if you want to be sort of ninja about it, you can listen your way and say, well, oh, how did that work out? Something that you just love to say, like, are you friggin' kidding me? You really did that and thought that was going to happen? Well, that answer, I mean, did you want to hear that answer when you were that kid? I didn't. But if somebody said, okay, had that happen, and kind of help them connect the dots. And by the way, you get all the good information too, because they're just telling you, you're just listening. So yeah, there's just so much to that I'm still learning. And I'm at that stage. I don't know at what point, it sounds to me, Paul, you've experienced it. I'm at that stage where I realize I don't know squat compared to what I thought I knew as a parent. Because I get a lot of people, you're a good parent. Okay, great, I must know everything. No, there's so much I don't know right now, but it's fun. I'm learning more.
That's great. That's great. Well, empathy, I think, is just really, that's the key, a key skill for so much of this. I do like the way you take the pressure off of the whole, because so many coaches are pitching all this idea of like finding your why, and then magically, the buckets of money are just going to just start arriving daily. And that's just, it's always struck me as very naive. It's certainly a fantasy I would love to buy into, because if you could just do whatever you wanted and then, just magically the money would occur, it would be really great. But I think that is the thing that we're all trying to deal with as human beings who want to find more meaning, is trying to find that more meaning and then reconcile it with the bills. And, I don't think either one of us has that magic answer of how you go, this weekend, just shave off $20,000, $30,000 in your costs. But it is important to start thinking about what, especially if you're middle of your life, what is important to you and what is going to be important to you, because nobody's going to solve it for you, right?
Right. Well, I think, remember once I was listening to a coach on doing different sales processes and funnels and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I remember at one point he said, you can sell anything, just don't tell people it's going to be work. Okay, great. Well, so basically that's just BS where I come from. That's nonsense. But the other thing is, to your point, it's not going to happen right away. But one of the things that are easier to have happen is cutting expenses. And so, sometimes people wonder, why was it so popular in the 90s for consultants to come in and just hack expenses of these companies? Because the companies were saying, look, it's a lot harder to double profits than it is to half expenses. And it doesn't mean you have to half expenses. But if you look at certain things, it is sometimes easy to say, okay, well, you know what, maybe that's not working. Or specifically as an entrepreneur, hey, I tried this marketing thing and it didn't work. And sometimes maybe we think that, well, I wrote a check, so the marketing gods are supposed to smile favorably upon me and send a bunch of money. And it doesn't work like that. Or it might be that you didn't follow through. So it's not necessarily a blame thing to say, oh, they tricked me. It might be that they said, no, there were 5 steps to implement. And I've done this plenty of times. I just didn't get around to implementing, or I got excited. And so part of the fault is on me. So again, if we can keep away from the blame thing and just look at bottom line, you put this money here. Is it paying off? No. Well, maybe it'll pay off later. So cut back at that and just looking at the things. Well, that's something that usually you can find anywhere from 5 to 25% of your expenses that are not being used as wisely as you think they could, or they could. And if you're not sure if an advertising campaign's working, pull the plug on it for 30 days or 60 days. And if the sales don't change, guess what? It wasn't working. And so from that perspective, it can be quick to change a lot of things that way. And then also to look at, and this is one of the toughest things. So you and I are in this podcast world and we're meeting really cool people. And one of the things, if you're not careful, is you can spend forever just being on podcasts with people or shows, and because it feels good. It's like going to meditation workshops or inspirational workshops. And you can just do that and say, well, I'm working, and yes, there's work to it. But if you never monetize it, see, I did that for a while. And that's why I had to pull back on some of my episodes and slow down, because I was so just doing the part I loved, which is having conversations like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was teaching, which I love, but I wasn't doing make sure you're charging, make sure you're doing the mechanics, the stuff that didn't feel aligned with my sole purpose. But at the end of the day, okay, if the money's not coming in, those things can't continue. And so I think that's the part that there is still a reality to it. And if you really have earned something and you look at the people who are behind you in the path and you say, sorry, you can't yet be where I am because, see, I've earned this, then you've got to be willing to say, oh, they're ahead in the path of where I am. See, I can't yet be there. I've got to work to get where they're getting. That's the natural part. And if you are willing to do the work, that's friggin' awesome because you're going to get there. But if you're not willing to do the work, kind of sucks. And so that's the part that I think, any course, you and I have both know this one, any course that promises you that you're going to go anywhere ridiculously huge in a short period of time without any evidence you've been there before is really, that's kind of pushing a lot. Now, on the other end, if you say, hey, wait, there's this entrepreneur course that says, hey, if you're making 100,000, they can help you get to 150. There's certain things that once you're at multiples, it's easier. Hey, you're at 1 million, we can get you to 5. Yeah, because you've already learned quite a few steps. It takes a lot to get to 1 million. It takes a lot to get to 6 figures. But when somebody says, you've never been an entrepreneur before, and we're going to teach you how to make 6 figures and this and that, they might point to one case of one person that's a sample of 1 out of 10 million or 10,000. And they might be telling the truth that it happened. But not everybody gets to sell pet rocks and makes $10 million. Not everybody gets to sell something that doesn't really truly have a lot of substance to it, or something that's, again, one of those zero-sum games of, flipping stuff where, I got in this stock first because somebody told me you can't get in, as opposed to something that's fundamentally true. If it happens quicker than farming, than a natural life cycle of at least a year, it's probably not true and it's not going to last. Any business takes at least 3 to 5 years for it to become a business. Now, you can sell a bunch of stuff. You can do some kissy face pictures on Instagram and sell some stuff. But even then, pretty soon there's gonna be somebody younger than you, hotter than you, sexier than you, or whatever it is, or has a newer tool. So for me, it's still about the fundamentals. And as a parent, that's what we hope for. If I put the time into the relationship with my child, I hope that 20 years from now, we have a good relationship, as opposed to feeling like I have no say, just like as with an entrepreneur. As much as the software business is not my passion, one of the positive things about my commitment to being a provider was, okay, I might not love this, but I need to provide. So I'll do these things. I'm grateful to have an opportunity to serve people. They're saying they want this. I'm delivering this. It's paying the bills, and it's affording me to live a certain lifestyle. So I could do a job I love and work more hours, but I want less hours. So there's still a real world trade-off in there, as there isn't anything.
Yeah, I think that it's really important advice, especially for people in our business who we're talking to people every day. We're in your cases, you've got a course that you do sell. That's the 3-day weekend club, and you can find that at 3dayweekendclub.com. But to be realistic about how this is really a process, and anybody trying to sell you something that's going to make you $1 million next week is probably selling you something else. And that's one of the things that I love about coaching is in general of philosophy of its continuous improvement. We're not talking about a finish line that's 3 months out, a year out, even 5 years out, but that we're all imperfect human beings, and it's less important to compare ourselves to other people than to our own evolution as human beings. So it's been really, we've talked about a lot of different things here, Wade, and I really appreciate the time. We got all over the map, from family dynamics to how you spend your weekend and how you outsource. But it was a good ground to cover, and I think it still comes back to the thing that we kind of started with, which is the importance of the relationships that you have and your family, and trying to do a lot of this stuff, whether it is making $1 million, at the service of them rather than the other way around. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Really enjoyed this.
All right, you can find more of Wade at 3-Day Weekend Club. That's 3 with the number 3, 3dayweekendclub.com. And if you're interested in coaching services for trying to be a more involved and present father, you can find me at GreatDad.com/coaching. So until next week, see you.